there's an awful lot of people that want to know how to do business across the African continent, but don't really know where to start. So the book addresses that. It tackles Africa at a sort of quantitative level. There's an awful lot of publications out there that talk to you about how big Africa is, how the economies are growing, and kind of state the case, but don't really get under the skin of what's going on and how to go about it.
And it's quite an easy read, even for somebody who is not into business. Some of the chapters that I read as well, Mind the Gap, the traffic is your friend, or one of them is... Was that the intention, to make it an easy read?
Absolutely. I think a lot of the publications that we've seen in the last couple of years are quite academic. They're designed for economists and financial analysts. I wanted this book to be for an artist or for a CEO, for anybody who really had a product or an idea that wanted to understand how to connect with various countries on the continent.
What is the biggest mistake that some of the businesses make when they want to start a business in Africa?
I think the biggest mistake is probably twofold. One is assuming it's like other places that they've worked before, and it's not. It's quite unique. I think the second thing is that they believe that people in those markets are not as capable as they are themselves. So they go in with a view that they are going to apply their way of doing things, their methodology into that market, where in fact, some of the most savvy, quick-thinking business people on the planet are sitting in places like Lagos, Nairobi, Luanda, and Accra.
And do you treat the different countries differently as a business person?
Absolutely. I think Africa's really bad at managing its own brand. So it gets labeled as this big sort of homogenous lump called the continent, where in reality it's very distinctive. I mean, how you engage with business people in a boardroom in Lagos or in Abuja is fundamentally different on the East Coast, whether you're in Dar es Salaam or maybe Mombasa.
What are the highlights of putting this book together?
Well, I think the highlights were just unearthing some of the really interesting trends that are quite unique to various parts of the continent, and to share with people just industries that they just don't understand and ways of doing business that they wouldn't particularly be used to.
Speak to us about those trends. What are those trends?
I'll give you a good example. One of my favorite is the rise of Christian pastors, or as we call it, the commercialization of Christianity across the continent. You meet these sort of mega stars who are preaching. They have radio stations. One gentleman I worked with had 3 TV stations. He broadcast internationally across the world. And you just don't get to know about these people sitting here in Johannesburg or in London or in Singapore. That was a real highlight for us as well. Other key trends I think that are quite evident in the book is also the rise of what we call Afrocentric design. The idea of this new design aesthetic coming out of Africa, and the absolute fascination people have with it all over the world.
Now, you say the level of misinformation and the hype being touted about Africa is considerable. How do we stop that? How do we change that?
I think how we stop it is by telling our own story. I think a former South African minister once said, if the lions don't tell their stories, only the hunters' stories will be heard. And Africa's story and the continent's story is usually told by non-Africans. It's told by people in London, it's told by people in New York, and they sort of create the dominant discourse on the continent. I think how we change that is by taking control of our own story, is by spreading a message to the rest of the world, but also amongst Africa nations. I think one of the biggest challenges you'll find is that we don't trade with each other often enough. Uganda is very happy to trade with Europe, and West Africa is very happy to trade with the States. Everybody's trading with China, but we're not trading amongst ourselves. And if we want to sort of grow our economy, take control of our own future, that's one of the main sort of indicators of the main things we can do.
Speak to us about how difficult it was to make sure that it's not this ginormous academic book that people need to read. It's a small, but it's a good read, and it's got enough information in it.
I think there was so much going on. I think one of the key things was to choose where to start. So I tried to pick a wide variety of trends that would be interesting to a wide variety of people. So you could pick it up as a chief executive and you could kind of get some information out of it. But when we launched the book a couple of days ago, I had a young artist from a local South African band come and say, you know what, our music is, or we want to take our music to the continent, and now we know how. So we wanted it to be broad-reaching, and we wanted to make it, interesting and tell stories that hadn't been told before.
All right, Terry, thank you so much for talking to us. Terry Bian is the author of Connect with the Continent, Understanding Key Consumer Trends Across the African Continent, right now available at all good stores. I tell you, it's a very good read. Let's take an break. We'll give you the Art Bulletin after this. Stay with us.